Okay, after a good start last night, let's read more about Darwin. And it turns out that it actually is really not that easy to be understood. So we read now about the modes of evolution, and we see that evolution can occur by natural selection. And let me just look up this definition too, because like what I don't understand is how mutation is different from natural selection. So here we have Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace are the two co-discoverers of natural selection. Darwin is the principal theorist of the notion whose most famous work on the topic is On the Origin of Species. So natural selection is a drawn-out complex process involving multiple interconnected causes. Natural selection requires variation in population of organisms, okay? For the process to work, at least some of the variations must be heritable and passed on to organism descendants in some way. That variation is acted upon by the struggle for existence, a process that in effect selects variation conducive to the survival and reproduction of their bearers. Much like breeders choose which of their animals will reproduce and thereby create the various breeds of domesticated dogs, pigeons, and cattle, nature effectively selects which animals will breed and creates evolutionary change, just as breeders do. I don't know, like, this sounds weird, right? That nature selects just as breeders do. So, I mean, nature does not select. I mean, they put that into quotation marks, right? There's a struggle for existence, and then there are certain traits that survive. And a breeder, he can just decide randomly which criterion he wants to breed, right? But nature never selects. It is a pre-given question of who can survive in a certain environment. So, I mean, I think what is weird is to talk about here of nature as a personified entity. That struggle is itself the results of checks on the geometric population increases that it would occur in the absence of the checks. Like, this article is badly written. Like, let's just check that on ChatGPT. So I just asked here whether that can be better written. And they write, the struggle arises from the natural checks that prevent unchecked geometric population growth. But what I find like weird is that it is the results of checks that would occur in the absence of the checks. So if it's a result of the checks, then yeah. It should increase if there were not these checks. Otherwise, it would not be a check, right? So all populations, even slow breeding ones, such as those of elephants, will increase in size in the absence of limitations on growth that are imposed by nature. All populations, even slow breeding ones, okay, we had this. These checks take different forms in different populations. Such limitations may take the form of limited food supply, limited nesting sites, predation, disease, harsh climate conditions, and much else besides. One way or another, only some of the candidate reproducers in natural populations actually do reproduce, often because others simply die before maturity. Owing to the variations among the candidate reproducers, some have better chances of making it into the sample of actual reproducers than do others. If such variations are heritable, the offspring of those with the beneficial traits will be likely to reproduce, especially many further descendants themselves. Okay, that's all clear, right? To use one of Darwin's example, wolves with especially long legs that allow them to run more quickly will be more likely to catch prey and thereby avoid starvation, and so produce offspring that have especially long legs that allow them in turn to breed and produce still more long-legged descendants and so on. By means of this iterative process, a trait conducive to reproduction that is initially found in one or a few population members will spread through the population. I mean, this is all clear, right? So where's the complicated part here? So multiple bouts of Darwin's process involving different traits, acting sequentially or in concert, may then explain both how speciation and the evolution of complex adaptations occur during the gradual evolution of natural populations. Darwin aimed to convince his audience that even such structures as the vertebrate eye, which at first seem explicable only as the product of design, could instead be explained by incremental directional evolution, a complex but still naturalistic process. What is initially a light-sensitive patch may be transformed into an eye by means of a great many bouts of selection that gradually improve and enhance its sensitivity. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anyone who doubts that anymore, right? So showing that something is explicable is importantly different from explaining it. Still, a theory must be an explanatory sort of theory for it to accomplish either task. After Darwin, the appearance of novel species in the geological record and the existence of designed appearing adaptations cannot be used as grounds for invoking supernatural causes as a matter of last explanatory resort. So yeah, I guess there were people who criticized that and said like, look here, like why are there not any novel species appearing? Yeah, I don't understand the sentence here, but we can just ask ChatGPT to explain that, right? So this is my normal research process now. It's really so helpful. Yeah, so explicability versus explanation. The first part highlights that demonstrating something can be explained is different from actually providing the explanation itself. For example, you might show that a mystery can be solved without actually solving it. Okay, but like, is that a good example? No. So theory versus explanation. The passage then states for a theory to be useful in either showing explicability or providing an explanation, it must inherently be an explanatory sort of theory. This means the theory must be capable of explaining things, not just raising more questions, okay? Maybe this also answers to people who say, I'm just asking questions. So Darwin's impact. After Darwin's theory of natural selection, the appearance of new species in the fossil record and traits that seem designed are no longer justifiable reasons to invoke supernatural explanations. Before Darwin, such phenomena might have led people to assume a supernatural cause as a last resort. But Darwin's work provided a natural, specific explanation, making it unnecessary to turn to supernatural causes. Yeah, this is clear. So, okay, after Darwin, we don't need natural causes anymore. So now we have two concepts of natural selection. Natural selection is chiefly discussed in two different ways among contemporary philosophers and biologists. One usage, the focused one, aims to capture only a single element of one iteration of Darwin's process under the rubric natural selection, while the other, the capacious usage, aims to capture a full cycle under the same rubric. These are clearly alternative, non-competing uses of the term and distinct philosophical controversies surrounding each one. So I don't understand what are the two. So can they just say what the two are? So the focused usage of natural selection finds its home as an interpretation of a single term in some of these formalisms. Yeah, I don't like how this is written. Okay, so the capacious tries to capture the process in its whole. Yeah, I just wonder like, okay, let's also ask ChatGPT here because I want to know what are the two and why are they important. What are the two modes of selection and why are they important? So let's see. The focused mode of selection zeroes in one single aspect or component of Darwin's process, often within formal or quantitative frameworks. It quantifies just one part of the natural selection process, such as the effect of traits on offspring numbers or the relationship between phenotype and fitness. This mode is valuable for precise, detailed analysis, okay? And then the capacious usage. The capacious mode, on the other hand, encompasses the entire circle of Darwin's process, including variation, inheritance, and reproduction. It captures the full complexity of natural selection as it plays out over generations. This broader perspective is essential for understanding the overall dynamics. Okay, so I think I get it. So, like, either we explain a small part or we explain the overall part. Evolutions and the conditions for natural selection. Philosophers and biologists have been concerned to state the conditions for evolution by natural selection. Many because they take it that there is a single theory, evolutionary theory, that governs Darwin's process. In many ways, the attempt to state the conditions for natural selection is typical philosophical undertaking. We know, for instance, that confirmatory evidence may be used to raise our confidence in what it confirms, and this recognition spawns a debate over what exactly should count as confirmation. Yeah, confirmation is a difficult topic because you cannot just confirm a theory. So we also have to look into that, what confirmation means here. So human cognition and behavior heavily relies on the notion that evidence can affect the credibility of hypotheses. This general idea seems to underlie sound and effective inferential practices in all sorts of domains, from everyday reasoning up to the frontiers of science. Yet it is also clear that even with extensive and truthful evidence available, drawing a mistaken conclusion is more than a mere possibility. For painfully tangible examples, one only has to consider missed medical diagnosis or juridical errors, is usually credited for having disclosed the theoretical roots of these considerations in particular transparent ways. In most cases of interest, Hume pointed out, many alternative candidate hypotheses remain logically compatible with all the relevant information at one's disposal, so that none of the former can be singled out by the latter with full certainty. Thus, under usual circumstances, reasoning from evidence must remain fallible. So let's say I say that Santa Claus exists. That's usually the example. And then I find a lot of confirmation. For example, there are presents under the tree the next morning. Or I saw a Santa Claus on the streets. Or like he ate the cookies and the milk. This is all confirming my hypothesis, but it does not rule out that Santa Claus is just an invention and that other people do these things. So confirmation in itself is not enough to make a theory true. This fundamental insight has been the source of lasting theoretical challenge. If amenable to analysis, the role of evidence as supporting or infirming hypothesis has to be grasped by more nuanced tools than plain logical entailment. As emphasized in a joke attributed to American philosopher Morris Raphael Cohen, logical textbooks had to be divided in two parts. In the first part, on deductive logic, unwarranted forms and inference are exposed, deductive fallacies. In the second part, on inductive logic, there are endorsed. Okay, hard to understand this joke, right? So, like, obviously there's a contradiction. So when we do deductive logic, then we show unwarranted forms of inference. And then in the second part, on inductive logic, these are actually endorsed. I mean, it is like, I have to think about it, but if I say something like, I mean, an inference works the way that I have, for example, different observations. Like, let's say Earth is a planet and has a moon, Mars is a planet and has a moon, Saturn is a planet and has a moon, Jupiter is a planet, therefore it has a moon. So the inference is drawn correctly, but it's only inductively correct. That means it's probable. it's not necessarily correct. And so in the deductive logic, we would say this is not a logical inference, not valid. So I guess in the first part of the textbook, you show how this is not valid reasoning. And then in the second part, you show this is actually valid reasoning. So in contemporary philosophy, confirmation theory can be roughly described as the area where efforts have been made to take up the challenge of defining plausible models of non-deductive reasoning. Yeah, this is what I mean, right? Its central technical term, confirmation, has often been used more or less interchangeably with evidential support, inductive strange, and the like. Here, we will generally comply with this liberal usage, although more subtle conceptual and terminological distinctions are drawn. Confirmation theory has proven a rather difficult endeavor. In principle, it would aim at providing understanding and guidance for tasks such as diagnosis, prediction, and learning in virtually any area inquiry. Yet popular accounts of confirmation have often been taken to run into troubles, even when faced with toy philosophical examples. Be that as it may, there's at least one real-world kind of activity which has remained a prevalent target and benchmark. That is scientific reasoning, and especially key episodes from the history of modern and contemporary natural science. The motivation for this is easily figured out. Mature sciences seem to have been uniquely effective in relying on observed evidence to establish extremely general, powerful, and sophisticated theories. Indeed, being capable of receiving genuine support from empirical evidence is itself a very distinctive trait of scientific hypotheses as compared to other kinds of statements. A philosophical characterization of what science is would then seem to require an understanding of the logic of confirmation. And so traditionally, confirmation theory has come to be central concern of philosophical science. So it seems sciences, they use confirmation, right? Yeah, and I think this becomes a more difficult issue. Now, my Opera browser is not responding. Okay, now it is. Yeah, so it becomes more complicated. I think that's the problem. And what did they say here about Darwin? So yeah, they should count as confirmation, although this complicated term. Similarly, Darwin's theory, like his examples, right? Similarly, Darwin's theory shows how some natural phenomena may be explained, including at least adaptations and speciations, and thus it is similar philosophical concern to state exactly when the development of the theory is licensed. Such a statement would then issue in a verdict on what beyond the phenomena targeted by Darwin is equally explicable using his theory. Such a verdict could be used to arbitrate whether the spread of cultural variations memes is genuinely explicable using the theory as Dawkins suggested. Okay, so we somehow can expand his theory, as Dawkins has, for example, developed the theory of memes. The mammalian immune system may equally involve dynamics that are explicable as selection processes. Jurek has even defended using the theory to explain phenomena in quantum mechanics. Charlotte and others offer a critical appraisal of the operation of natural selection outside the context of living organisms. Here are the three principles that form the logical skeleton of Darwin's argument, according to Lewontin. Different individuals in a population have different morphologies, physiologies, and behaviors. That's the phenotypic variation, that's how they occur, right? Different phenotypes have different rates of survival and reproduction in different environments. That's the differential fitness. And then there's a correlation between parents and offspring in the contribution of each to future generations. Fitness is heritable. Lewontin principles invoke implicitly or explicitly a number of causal processes, including development, reproduction, survival, and inheritance. Though it is controversial whether Lewontin succeeds, clearly his three principles aim to capture at least what is sufficient for a cycle of evolutionary change by selection, something which, if repeated, could be used to explain adaptation and speciation. Yeah, so I don't understand why we get more and more specific here. So for me, it's quite clear, right? There's variety, then there's a selective pressure, and then traits get inherited. And I don't understand why we have to be so precise here. So different individuals within a species differ from one another in physiology, blah, blah, blah. We already said that the variation is in some way heritable, so that on the average offspring resemble their parents more than they resemble other individuals, okay? Different variants leave different numbers of offspring, either immediately or in remote generations. Yeah, this is all clear, right? So, I mean, where's this controversial? If you know, like, please let me know. So, this later statement is in many ways similar to the earlier one, yeah, but there's some crucial difference in the formulation. According to the later article, the different individuals must be within the same species, and it's phenotypic variations rather than fitness that must be inherited. Many authors have echoed Levantin influential principles for thorough review. Sorry, C for thorough review, Gottfried Smith, for markedly different approaches to formalize the theory. So why is that all important? I don't understand that. So interestingly, Levinton has been criticized. For one thing, they make no mention of the populations in which selections occur, and though the second set of conditions refers to species, all members of a single species may not form a single population for the purposes of applying selection theory. Populations must be appropriately circumscribed for some of the key vocabulary of evolutionary theory to develop in a non-arbitrary fashion. Levinton's formulation also make no mention of the struggle of existence. Yeah, that's okay. A seminal notion for Darwin. The principles have also been subject to counterexamples. Yeah, I don't know if is evolution necessary for natural selection? Well, I thought natural selection is evolution. One natural way to arbitrate the issue of whether systems that undergo selections must evolve is to attend to the point of statements of principles of natural selection or statements of the requirement for selection. Many theorists take it that the point of these principles is to set out the scope of a theory in special sciences that deals with selection and evolution, evolutionary theory. Lewontin claims that the theory of evolution by natural selection rests on these three principles. Equally, Godfrey Smith claims that statements of conditions for evolution by natural selection exhibit the coherence. Yeah, I don't know what the discussion here is about, to be honest. I guess this is like a very in-depth question of evolution already. And maybe we just skip that and go to the general article on evolution again. If you know what that is about, then please let me know. So let's look here again. So they say it is essential to understand that biologists recognize many ways that evolution can occur. Evolution by natural selection being one of them, although it is often held to be the most prevalent one. And that's what I really wonder. So maybe genetic drift is much more important because maybe species tend to be exposed to coincidental events. I'm not sure. Evolution can also occur through genetic drift, mutation, or migration. Okay, migration, I understand. They migrate somewhere else. But isn't mutation part of natural selection? Or I guess, okay, this is different from what I learned in school. So natural selection says that there's already genetic variety in the genome that does not require mutation. Okay, that's very interesting. It's definitely something that I learned. It can also occur through sexual selection, which some consider to be a form of natural selections, and others consider to be distinct from natural selection. Evolutionary theory then can be taken to be the study of these and other modes of evolution. This is very interesting because like somebody always told me that sexual selection is a part of the mode of survival, but that does not seem to be the case. So yeah, that's interesting. So to see why it makes sense to think of multiple modes of evolution, consider again one of the definitions of evolution presented above, where evolution is understood as any change in the frequency of, and I don't know how to pronounce that. In German we say Allele, that confer greater fitness would tend to increase over those which confer lesser fitness. Okay, fitness is that which increases. Sexual selection would be the same, but with fitness understood strictly in terms of mating ability. With genetic drift, a form of evolution that involves chance, there could be an increase in the frequency of alleles that confer greater fitness, an increase in the frequency of alleles that confer lesser fitness, or an increase in the frequency of alleles whose manifestation, if any, was neutral. If organisms migrate from one population to another, it is likely that there will be a change in the frequency of alleles in both populations. And if there is a mutation from one allele to another, then the frequency of alleles in the population will likewise change, albeit by a small amount. Distinguishing these different modes of evolution allows biologists to track the various factors that are relevant for evolutionary changes in a population. Okay, so here this becomes interesting again, because basically it's about adaptationalism, but I suggest we finish here. So again, it is the question of what is the most important aspect of evolution? Is it natural selection that relies heavily on the concept of fitness with regard to environmental pressure? Or are there other modes of evolution? And why is that important? Well, I give you an example. So many of my friends, they argue that when you have a musical piece, or music in general, they say, well, why did humans develop music? Well, obviously, and it seems to be so obvious, communities that have music stick closer together. So that was actually an advantage with regard to humans that did not have music, and therefore music evolved. Right? And it seems to me that music may just have developed by chance, and then it was introduced in the kind of cultural genetic pool of humans, and now we make music because we like it. And maybe there is not necessarily always a hypothesis that supports natural selection, or maybe there is not always an evolutionary trait that we can observe in an organism that goes back to natural selection. And I think this is something we have to take very seriously. So if you like this adapted reading, I mean, okay, I read a lot, right? But if you assisted reading, right? Then give me a like and subscribe to the channel. For the rest, live long, study more evolutionary theory. Don't become an adaptationist, a mere adaptationist, and prosper.